All right, we're up.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. We will now begin the regular meeting for Reclamation District 900. And we did meet on May 20th. However, we were having some technical difficulties, so we adjourned and reconvened on May 24th at 6 p.m. So pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, members and staff will participate in this meeting via video conference, and public comments can be submitted in writing to admin@rd900.org. And please write public comment on the subject line. The link to watch the meeting is via YouTube at the Reclamation District 900 website. Next, we will go to item 1A, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda. And within the jurisdiction of the district, the agency is prohibited by law from discussion issues not on the agenda brought to them at this time. And Mr. General Manager, are there any items presented under public comment?
No.
Mr. General Manager, no? Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm not aware of any request to speak for matters from the general public.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to item 1B, and I believe there is a part when we need to, yes, we do. That's under consent agenda. Monthly, so it's under monthly year-to-date budget report, which is item 1B. And I believe we have a presentation for that, Mr. General Manager?
It'll just be very brief, but yes. So this is the year-to-date actuals through April. As you can see in the report, there was no revenue. However, as a percent of the budget total, it's tracking very well as we approach the end of the fiscal year. On the expense side, it's $155,000, $156,000 expended during the month of April, primarily O&M and labor, and then the Drever remodel. All expenses are tracking pretty well as a percent of what's budgeted, with the exception of the Drever remodel, which is because we budgeted the full amount, it's just way behind its budget to actual. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the trustees. Are there any questions among the trustees? No questions.
I actually have a question, President Guerrero.
Trustee.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Trustee Orozco.
Thank you. With respect to the Drever remodel, is that the extent of the expenditures that we are planning to pay for that, or is there still a lot left over?
So what the item that's before you tonight, a little later on the agenda, it's on consent. That's the extent of the Drever remodel. I don't recall off the top of my head what that total amount is, but it's not 2.25 million.
Oh, no. Sorry. Yes. 2.25 million that's also doing Blacker Canal.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize what you're asking for. Yeah, that's significantly more than the Drever remodel.
All right. And if there are no questions, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Are there any public comments at this point, Mr. General Manager?
Mr. Assistant General Manager, has anybody from the public requested to speak on this item?
No, we have had no request.
No request. Close it, the public comment, bring it back to our trustees. And are there any other questions, comments, or accept a motion to, do we need a motion to approve the, Mr. Attorney, do we have to approve anything here? No, just accept it. No, okay. All right. We will next move to our consent agenda part 2. If there are any items that the trustees would like to pull or approve the consent agenda.
Looking for the mute button. Your Madam President tonight. So I recommend passage of the consent agenda.
Second. All right, Trustee Ledesma move and Trustee Alcala seconded. And Mr. General Manager, can you please call the roll? Or Mr. Assistant General Manager, whichever two you, I would just decide.
I'd like to try. Trustee Alcala?
Aye.
Trustee Ledesma?
Aye.
Trustee Orozco,
Aye.
President Guerrero.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Okay, it's approved. Next, we'll move to a regular agenda part 3, which is a workshop on the Reclamation District 900 fiscal year 2021, 2022 operations and maintenance budgets and capital improvement budget. And I would give it back to the general manager and assistant general manager, or Mr. Dumars, who's ever going to present on this.
I'll be conducting the workshop this evening, and
Okay.
I can, if necessary, we can get in some input from Dustin and Tim. Tim, do I have permission to share my screen?
Probably not, but I can give it to you. Just a second. Do you have the option now?
I do not.
Okay, you should have it now.
There we go. And we'll go to the presentation. Can everybody see the slides?
Yes, I could see it.
Yes.
All right, and now let me make sure that I can forward through these things. Do you see the next page?
Yes, I could see
Yes.
the agenda.
Okay. All right, so good evening, Madam
You
President,
need something from me?
trustees. Tonight, I'm going to present a workshop on the district budget for fiscal year 21-22. No specific action is being requested today. However, we are looking to get the board's feedback on the various items that are being proposed and any recommended changes to be given to staff that we can then put together into a final budget, which we can bring back to the board in June at the regularly scheduled meeting. So tonight, I'd like to go over the RD 900 fund structure, which has changed a little bit from, I think, what you've seen in previous year, which consists of the 900 drainage budget, a 537 drainage budget, a levy maintenance budget, as well as a capital improvement budget. We'll go over some recommendations for salary schedule and salary adjustments, and then again, seek board direction. So being proposed for your consideration this year is a splitting of the district's budget into 3 distinct fund structures. As the district has 3 distinct service areas, 900 drainage, the former 537 drainage area, as well as levy O&M, and 3 distinct, so 3 separate budgets are being proposed for this next fiscal year. The 900 drainage fund is specifically for that service area. However, it does also house the general overhead administration costs, all labor costs, and then it has its own specific O&M section. And the main reason why we housed the general overhead and labor costs into the 900 fund is that roughly 75% of the district's total revenue and its operational area is covered by this particular fund and budget. So it seemed the best place to put it. And then the 537 drainage fund and the levy O&M fund and their budgets, in addition to their own O&M expenditures, they also have a transfer to of the 900 budget. So an expense on their budgets show up as revenue on the 900 drainage budget to help support their fair share of the general overhead, administrative costs, as well as the labor costs. That split structure is roughly 75% in drainage, 2.5% in, 75% in the 900 drainage fund, 2.5% in the 537 drainage fund, and then 22.5% in the levy O&M fund. And those track very well with, or that that cost distribution based on revenue from each of those assessments, as well as tracking of labor that we've done over the past year has resulted as well in the same percent split. For these O&M budgets, the primary objective is to meet the O&M functions for the district across all of the service areas. And if the revenue and the, minus the expenditures, as well as the fund balance is sufficient, then the district can recommend, or staff can recommend, transfers to fund capital improvement projects on a as needed or case-by-case basis. So as I mentioned, the 900 fund carries the shared services, and general overhead administrative costs, and we're split them in sort of two subcategories, the GO&A and personnel. GO&A is for things like IT, facility costs, admin, payroll, HR, those types of things, and some of the shared vehicle maintenance as well. And then personnel is salaries and benefits. And we're just, for your information, I've included last year's total GO&A as compared to this year's GO&A. I don't know that necessarily it's a fair comparison as we're splitting these funds and budgets for the first time, but we did our best to sort of back populate what that budget would have looked like under this structure. And the difference on GO&A is primarily due to increase in permit costs as well as insurance costs, and some of the additional costs related to the Drever facility, as well as operating the Merkley facility, and that will continue on into the next fiscal year for a period of time when we have two facilities until the switch is made over to the Drever Street. On the personnel side, the biggest difference between last year's budget and this year's budget really is last year's budget did not budget for or account for the vacant assistant general manager position, and it's pretty much just that simple. So here's the 900 drainage O&M budget. On the revenue side, we're assuming, as has been the board's practice in previous fiscal years, that there will be an annual increase on the assessment of 2.25%. And in looking at the overall budget structure, before we get into the transfer to CIP, there is definitely more than adequate revenue to support the O&M expenditures. And the decision to fund capital improvement is made. We've already made the commitment for the Blacker Canal project. We've already made the commitment for the Drever capital improvement project. But as you can see, there's a sufficient fund balance as well as operating revenues to support those transfers as recommended in the next fiscal year. So the 537 drainage budget, the expenses for this budget do exceed revenues. Where am I? There we go. For the proposed fiscal year, not by much, a little over $6,000. And this is primarily due to the relatively large transfer out for its fair share of the personnel costs that are going, GO&A, that are going to the 900 budget. So this budget, as this is a new service area for the district, I think this bears close monitoring. We have a relatively stout fund balance for the size of operating budget that this is, but we do want to make sure that there is sufficient revenue to support the annual O&M operations moving forward. So we can, as we review this in the coming fiscal year, we may be bringing, recommendations to the board if it continues where the expenses look to be exceeding revenues.
And Greg, if I might,
Yeah.
This is the first year that this assessment's been scaled for exclusively covering drainage. In the past, it's covered more than that, drainage and levies. So this is the assessment rate that's in this 2020, 2021 budget is a first stab at trying to hone in on what it should be. So going with Greg saying that we need to monitor this situation, make sure that over time we ensure that the assessment is appropriate.
If I may, Madam President?
Yes, you may. I'm sorry, I
Thank
can't
you.
see you. I'm
That's
just,
okay. You get your head down. Good evening, everyone. So I just want to make sure I understand that, Tim and Greg. So on 537, what was in there prior? That you was it additional other costs? I'm just trying to that we stripped down to just simply what we needed to cover for drainage maintenance. Is that what I'm hearing? Trying to understand what you just.
Correct. When they established, because the assessment rate we're using that we're carrying over, which was established for the last fiscal year, was established by the previous. It was by RD 537 themselves,
Right.
and it was established based on a purely operations and maintenance, no capital improvement. And it was a guess at what the overhead administration was going to be. Yeah, they just had a plug-in number to cover it.
Okay.
So
and so as I'm looking at it, and there's a small amount budgeted here for the CIP work. Is there something else that is the commitment for that, or what other commitments? Yeah, what other commitments are out there that may not get funded as a result? Or is it all
the major commitment that's out there that's an unknown is the either replacement or revampment of the pump station, which is a considerable cost. At the very least, it would be installing a concrete floor in it.
Okay.
In the sump. So that was always anticipated where the majority of that reserve would wind up, is covering that project.
Okay. And so there is a reserve of 537 assessment dollars that could be dedicated. I'm looking, as I look at the budget, all I'm seeing is just the annual, what I'm assuming is the annual revenue coming in from the assessment. Are there dedicated dollars already reserved that I'm not seeing here?
Well, we have the fund balance at the projected fund balance at the beginning of next fiscal year, as well as the projected ending balance. So we project to have a fund balance in that, in the 537 drainage fund of about $874,000.
Okay. Okay.
Now, when we first took on 537, we started out with a fund balance of about $838,000. And so even though,
all right, so
we're growing it, but not by much. And it's likely not
okay.
increased by much each year, as you know, the revenue and expenditures are very closely matched.
thanks, Greg. Is this 537 drainage O&M in the agenda packet by any chance, or is it just here on the screen? I'm just trying to find it.
Yeah, it's in the
It's
agenda.
on slide, it's in, I lost track of pages, but yeah, it's after exhibit attachment 3, I think it is.
It's after attachment 3, okay.
I think so. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't tell what page it is. I'm sorry. 70.
73.
I'm looking at a PDF.
73?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So again, I want to, I just want to make sure I'm clear. So, there we are growing the fund balance. That's the part I guess I'm keen in on, as I'm getting used to how we view financials of the district's funds, and our ability to grow the fund. Do we? And I guess as we go forward, the assessment itself, being able to cover, like, we're going to be watching this very closely, to make sure we can address the fund balance. And grow it, right, Greg? That's ultimately what we're going to cover the costs and grow it. But is there, and I guess in the future, seeing the history of what the assessment revenue has been, or have there been increases? Kind of what those increases have been, or?
Yeah, my understanding is that, I mean, this engineer's report for the assessment goes back to the 1940s, I think. And I don't believe it has escalator built in. So these are revenues that have been pretty flat, and the only increase in revenue really is through development in the service area.
Yeah, the way it was previously done is they developed a budget and then backed the assessment rate out of it. So, like in 1920, it was, I believe, 55 or 56 cents per $100 improvement. Right now, it's at 20 cents.
And sorry, did you say 1920?
Yeah, year 19. Sorry, fiscal year
Okay, it's
2019.
1920. Like,
Yeah.
I know it goes back that far, but I'm like,
No, I don't think we have those.
okay. All right, that's good to know. In fact, I guess maybe that's something offline going into as we progress on the budget. I'd be interested in seeing the history of sort of what that difference was, and it's not imperative, but I'm just trying to get a sense of how we're the fund balance. Like, to your point, what are we monitoring for?
Yeah,
I mean, if this budget
Yeah.
is were to be enacted, if you will, exactly as we've illustrated here, we would run, we would dip into our fund balance by $6,800 at the end of the fiscal year.
Yep.
Now, we're going to do our best to stay to keep our expenses within the budgeted revenue, but we felt it important to, from a budgeting standpoint, this is what we think is going to be needed for the service area. We haven't maintained that service area. This is new to us. Want to make sure we have the revenue, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done that's been neglected. Vegetation and other things, and so we do anticipate that although it's going to be a big lift this fiscal year, it may not be as big a lift in subsequent fiscal years.
Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
President Guerrero, I also have
Yes.
a question.
Trustee Alcala, go ahead.
I'm not sure, how is this funded again? Are you not funding certain things? And that's how we grow the fund balance? You gave an example of one, but I wasn't certain how that was done. And also looking at this chart, you mentioned about certain vegetations, but under pesticides, I'm assuming that's how, use some sort of pesticides to control that. There's only, what is it, 2,500 that's being
there's a lot
budgeted
of
for that.
manual labor that goes with mowing and weeding. Primarily pesticides and herbicides are a supplement to the manpower.
Okay, all right. And I'm sorry,
But-
the fund balance again, could you explain that to me? I mean, how
Well, I
do we
mean,
grow that
it's-
by not budgeting certain things and then holding them
No,
over
we're-
to another
we're-
year?
We are budgeting for all of the things that we feel need to be budgeted for to operate that area. And we think it's going to be a little bit more expensive this year than in maybe future years because of the deferred maintenance that we've inherited. And so we believe we've budgeted accordingly. And with that sort of robust budget, our expenses are a little bit more than our revenue this year, or projected for next fiscal year. And so, but because we have a decent fund balance, we can dip into it without hurting, the overall budget's the fund in the budget. But our goal would be to, at a minimum, have our expenditures at least match revenues. And, in a perfect world, we have revenues exceeding our expenditures such that we're able to grow the fund balance so that we have reserves in case, there's needed expenses for repair or a planned capital project.
All right, Greg, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, and now we go to the levy O&M budget. The revenue from this, for this fund and for this budget comes from WSAFCA. It's the O&M distribution from the flood assessment. And, this one houses not only the 900 levy O&M distribution, but also the former 537. So both of those revenue sources land here. And here, there's plenty of revenue to support planned expenditures. And that allows for us to, as we've talked about before, grow the fund balance and I think, right, it's projected to be a little over 2 million. But in terms of, having enough fund capacity in case of, a severe storm season and needing to do repairs, although much of that, might be shared cost with the state or the Army Corps, we'd like to have more than, $2 million as in reserves, if you will, in case it's ever needed. But in terms of the strength of this budget, it's looking good for the next fiscal year.
I'm sorry, Greg.
Yeah.
So when you say more than $2 million in reserves, are you thinking of the fund balance over $2 million is keeping it above that threshold?
Yeah, actually, I think we'd like to get this thing up closer in the plus 3 million, approaching maybe 5 million. If there's ever a real bad winter and we need to do a major levee repair, we're going to need help from our reserves as well as others. So having a fund balance in this fund, I think, is pretty important.
Okay.
I think we're showing up, even after the expenditures of CIP, we have, we're approaching $500,000 in positive cash flow. So
yeah,
continues each year. It'll be no time flat that we'll have a good reserve balance.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, capital projects. The district doesn't have a whole lot of capital projects, and that's okay. We're primarily an operations and maintenance district. The top table is, kind of what we have going on right now. We've got the Corporation Yard, Drever design and administration, as well as the construction of it. And this shows the total budget to date, does not include the item before the board tonight that you just approved. And then it's got the Blacker Canal environmental and permitting. It's got the expenditures through the end of last month, as well as the remaining balances for those projects. And what we're looking at requesting for the board to consider for next year is construction of Blacker Canal, which we're estimating at about $1.8 million. The estimate that was created at the time that the grant was applied for, which was 2016, I think, was 1.5 million. So we've scaled that up to about 1.8. But regardless of what's presented here, at the time that we would be going to construction for that project, we'll go out to bid. We'll bring the summary of those bids and a recommendation to award to a firm, and those costs will then be known, and hopefully we'll be at or under the budget, recommended amount. And then we've budgeted for some computer upgrades, essentially, and those are shared. And just to point out, the Blacker Canal is solely under the RD 900 drainage budget, unlike the IT upgrades, which is a shared cost at those percentages we talked about, the 75, 2.5, and 22.5, across the three budgets. And then the last thing I think I'd point out for the Blacker Canal project in particular, that is anticipated to receive grant funding from FEMA, and the cost share on that is 25% local, 75% the Fed money, which is reimbursable. So the sum total of the construction, of the environmental and permitting and the construction cost would be reimbursed. 75% of that would be reimbursed to the district following completion of the project. All right. So now, well, before I move on to this slide, I'm going to back up one. Are there any questions about the O&M budgets, the split amongst into the three funds and operating budgets? Any questions about housing the GO&A and labor within the 900 budget and or the capital projects at this point?
Any questions? Anybody?
No.
Trustee Ledesma, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know if it's a question, and I know we would have to adopt this, but as a board, I agree with the direction we're going, Greg, in short, but I'm just trying to understand kind of what our actions will need to be when we actually do adopt it, especially when considering kind of the methodology you're using to sort of split out costs. I think that's what I heard, right, is a 75-22 share of towards certain expenditures, right? I think that's, did I hear that right? And I'm just trying to think of it of when does it become something that the board needs to be aware of as a change in that methodology, right? So
Yeah, that's
as a control point.
That's a really good question, and quite frankly, it's a point that I wanted to make in my presentation that I didn't make. So, if you'd allow me. So thus far, based on revenue as well as time tracked, we're right at those percentages: 75 in the 900 service area, 20.5 in the levee maintenance, and the 2.5 in RD 537 drainage area. But we are going to continue to have staff track their time in those 3 service areas. And if there's a significant shift in revenue, or there's a significant shift in the amount of labor and man hours required for any of these, we can bring those distributions back to the board, and we can either implement in addition to implementing a new methodology moving forward based on actuals. We can also true up from the previous fiscal year as well, especially if there's a significant shift in percent of time in any one of the budget areas. And that's something that is done, by way of example. It's not a direct correlation, but the way WSAFEC and the city interact, there's assumed costs that the agency is going and staff is going to expend on behalf of the agency, and at the end of the year, we true up every year for actual expenditures versus planned expenditures. This is a little bit different in that we've assumed a methodology based on both empirical data from revenue as well as our labor hours. But we're going to keep checking on that to make sure that those assumptions hold true. And if they deviate, then we'll bring that information back to the board and we can make recommendations for any changes.
Greg, it might be worth mentioning too that on that on the projected 2020, 2021s, the distribution of the overhead administration is based on actual hours worked by field staff through April.
Right.
So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just posing the question because I figured year 1 is sort of baseline to see where this goes, right? And then,
right.
But I think it's something the board will need to think about is you start to go forward and we adopt budgets going forward based on a certain methodology to make sure the assessments are tracking, and if we do need to make it, we can always point to where costs have been, as you're pointing out, even this year was based on actual expense side on, and so anyway, it's just something that I'm thinking about. I don't know how we resolve it for this budget, or if we do. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Understood. Yeah. All right.
And just to make sure there's no other questions among the trustees, I can't see everybody, but just throw it out there. Any other? Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for the clarification about the percentages. It's good to know that you did have a starting point, probably due to your kind of like analysis from prior years. That fortunately we have Tim, who's been there long enough to be able to have that institutional memory as to what where people are and what they do and what the expenditures are. So that helps a lot. To be able to gauge, the breakdown and whether or not we can rely on this moving forward. And on occasion, I anticipate maybe there's going to be an expense, as you are, stating here. It could be some, due to, a storm or something that may just change it abruptly, which we didn't anticipate. But I'm sure you'll keep us posted if something like that happens. You'll let us know. So, thank you.
All right, so the slide before you now is the current salary and steps for all of the positions in the district. And the current policy calls for step increases after the probationary period And this is with the exception of the maintenance worker positions. It's one step every 2 years, with the top step at 7. The maintenance worker 1 and 2 series, they have advancement between steps every year. However, the policy is currently written, somebody hired as a maintenance worker 1 would progress through all 7 steps before advancing to maintenance worker 2. And then they would progress through the remaining 6 steps for a total of 13 years. Well, 12 and a half if it's only 6-month probationary between step 1 and 2. So 12 and a half years to advance to top step. The other positions, it's 13 and a half years before they advance to top step. So moving to what management is proposing. So first, let's talk about the focus on some of the structural changes, and that is having everybody get 7 steps. And under this proposed policy, there would be 7 annual steps, with the exception of the probationary period, which is 6 months before they can advance from step 1 to step 2. Now, let me see where there's some more notes. Oh yeah, so with all of the positions, and I think I said 7, my thing's blocking here, there's 9 annual steps under this proposal. And so in this scenario, all employees, maintenance worker through general manager, would be able to achieve full step, assuming they were hired at step 1, in approximately 8.5 years. Then what management is also proposing is to modify the series classification for maintenance worker 1 and 2. So instead of advancing all the way through maintenance worker 1 before you get into the 2 level, we're proposing that this be intended to be a series classification whereby employees are hired if they don't possess the required skill for journey level, which would be maintenance worker 2, they would receive that training and advance maintenance worker 2 within 2 years. This is similar to how the maintenance worker series classification is done at other agencies, specifically at the city. And I think it does one of 2 things. One, it sets the expectation that we require employees to attain the required skills, knowledge, and ability within 2 years. It's not an unreasonable request, as well as achieving the required certifications, Class A license, and so forth, and then go to and then become journey level workers. Having a defined advancement, I think, also serves to help with the third issue that I wanted to discuss, which was attraction and retention issues that the district has had for many years. I've learned quite a bit in the last few months on how the staffing has fared over the last 5 years, and we've had significant turnover. 5 maintenance worker positions in the last 4 years. The most recent was just 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. And every single one of them cited salary as the main factor as far as their departure. And then talking to staff, superintendent, foreman, assistant general manager, once the employees receive the training, equipment operation, Class A license, there's much more lucrative places elsewhere that they take that training and then go move on. And so kind of acting like a training ground in many respects. And then lastly, I want to talk about salary adjustments. The last time a cost of living adjustment was provided to staff was in 2018 for management administration. I think the maintenance workers had a range adjustment in 2019, but it had little to no effect on the recruitment effort. So management is proposing a 2% cost of living adjustment across the board. And for the maintenance worker 1 and 2 positions specifically, we're recommending a salary range adjustment of about 22%. That equates in dollars, that equates to about $13,600 for the maintenance worker 2 top step. That's an increase from previous step 7 to the now step 9. If all positions were filled and they were all at the top step, it is approximately $41,000 increase in the overall personnel budget. And that represents about 4% in the overall personnel budget. And before I move on to the summary of all of what we've covered here today, I'll pause there, maybe if there's any questions from the board.
Any question? Trustee Ledesma?
Thank you. Just no, I see where you're going, and the attrition, the retention issue is one we need to take. I appreciate the perspective of kind of what you learned, and I guess as we head towards adoption, I by way of, to your point of, if I think you stated that the district is maybe acted to a degree as a training ground for maintenance workers. They top out at, if I'm reading it right, top step ended at for maintenance worker 1 at 48. Am I right on that? Annually, and then so we're increasing that ability to grow and stay with us, right, for an extra 4 years. It looks like 5 years. Is that basically
Well,
what the 22% increase represents, right? It's the ability to move up that to that.
yes, I think what
scale.
it, yeah, and you know, when you look at what we're proposing as compared to the salary survey that was conducted a couple of years ago, even with this significant increase, we're still within the range that was, and we're not even at the top of the ranges that were surveyed from comparable reclamation districts and other agencies in the region. We're nearer the top, but we're not there. There are still other districts that are higher than this. And I think really what this is focusing on is, you know, maintenance is what we do. And the workers are the backbone, you know, of the district and of our operations. And so what we're hoping to do with this is to attract a higher caliber of employee with a defined path between maintenance worker 1 and 2. They have expectations of us when they come in, and we have expectations of them, and then we reward them appropriately. This also would bridge the gap significantly between maintenance worker 2 and the foreman. Currently, there's over a 40% gap in salary between maintenance worker top step and the foreman top step, and the foreman is their direct supervisor. That you don't typically see that type of spread, except for, you know, city manager to, you know, line manager. And so we really are bringing this up to be, you know, closer to 20% below the foreman, which is much, in my opinion, is much more appropriate from a supervisor worker salaries. And so, yeah, attract them and then be able to retain them.
Around, no, and I think if I read it right, for, you know, we're not, the impact to the ongoing O&M budget, if in place, feels like it would be within what we have over the same period of time.
Yeah,
right?
It's pretty negligible.
So,
yeah, $40,000 a year is the impact.
Yep.
And it's $1 million labor budget.
Yep. Okay. So I'm
Trustee
sure
Orozco?
I'm sorry.
Thank
No,
you.
I just wanted
No,
to
no, no.
respond, if I may, just, no, I appreciate the thought, and I'm not opposed to it. I would be interested in seeing, you had said we had a pay we did a survey of pay ranges for others, and maybe offline we can you can educate me on kind of what you saw on that. I don't want to take any more time, but thank you.
Okay.
Trustee Orozco?
Oh, thank you, President Guerrero. I actually had a question, and then after the after the discussion, it changed course. I mean, ultimately, you know, whatever we're hearing about our position with respect to other RDs or other jurisdictions, it's always difficult to measure apples to apples or apples to oranges in this case, because, you know, oftentimes the area that's being serviced in other jurisdictions is much larger or whatnot. And I always hesitate to say, well, of course, we're not going to keep up with the larger, you know, competitors or the other agencies that might be comparable if they are a fact at all. But I also appreciate the effort and the spirit behind why it is that you want to make these changes. And we have the budget, and it does not seem to be an extraordinary amount in comparison. So with that stated, I appreciate Trustee Ledesma's discussion about the comparables. And but yeah, the question that I had, I think, kind of tempered out once I heard the further discussion. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
President Guerrero,
Trustee
I have two
Alcala, go
questions.
ahead.
Thank you. I was going to ask, so when we do with the apprenticeships, do we focus on local hires when we do recruitment?
I have no experience in the apprentice, but I'll pump it over to Tim to talk about the district's previous experience with apprentices.
Thank you, Greg. And just one more quick question. And these are full benefits, medical, that come with these salaries?
No, these are the salaries. The benefits are on top of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Previously, well, the district up until recent years hasn't had a whole lot of turnover, so there wasn't a lot of recruitment. But I know the one apprentice that's come on during my tenure was in fact a local, and mostly getting this out through word of mouth prior. But given the situation we're in now, needing multiple positions filled right now, we're gonna have to try a different means. But hopefully it'll still find somebody local.
That's great, Tim. And how are we doing that? What are we doing for outreach? Tim, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Did you hear me?
Yes. As of yet, we have not started our outreach. We've been trying to hone in on these job descriptions and get the salaries established, if you will, if there's going to be a change, before reaching out to anyone, so that we can what we can promise them is what we know we can fulfill.
No, that's great. I was just wondering what kind of outreach we have so that we can make certain that the pool of candidates is large, and hopefully, you know, from here.
And right now, we don't have any apprentice positions budgeted in the current budget. There are no vacant apprentice positions. It's been used in the past as a means to bring people in, you know, to potentially train to assume a position as maintenance worker when those recruitments have failed. So if we do our jobs right with this planning effort now and with some of the salary adjustments, ideally we're bringing on, you know, full crew of qualified workers. Now, if the board is supportive of an apprentice program, I think that's something that we can add on to our current complement of positions and have one, we can start there, apprentice that we can, you know, have a full recruitment with, you know, some of the local high school graduates and you know, and bring them on board and get them trained up to perhaps enter this field or other. But as it stands right now, there's no vacant, if you will, apprentice positions.
Okay, Greg, thanks so much. I always ask that because sometimes when I hear young people out there, they're always saying there are no jobs. So, okay, thanks.
And I think it would be a great thing to do, quite frankly, but I think our focus right now is we got to get the staffing up to the appropriate levels.
I
right?
agree,
Right.
especially in these summer months. You know, extra bodies are always helpful, but again, yes, we need trained staff first. So.
Absolutely, right. And that trained staff, like that's also part of local hire that I was asking. So thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from anybody? Just want to add a little more. Thank you for that presentation. I did go out for a tour on Friday morning to meet with the maintenance worker, the foreman, and it was, just there's a lot of infrastructure that needs expertise. Just not anybody who can, who just needs a job can operate this machinery. It is complicated from what I can tell. And I would recommend, our trustees to go out on a tour if they get a chance and take a look at inside the RD900's location, because it provided not only for me just some insight on the machinery, and it, as it gets upgraded, for example, the IT and any other upgrades we need to protect our, cities and, the storm drains and the levees. I think we'd like to have people that have some understanding as to our composition here and, what to expect. And I think they can be called from all hours of the day if there is, for example, a storm. And so we like to find people who are flexible and, at a certain salary, sometimes you don't find that. And, just the amount of work in the summer that I've learned that it takes, and even seasonal, weeding that has to happen. And the machinery to even kind of do the dredging in some of the canals, that needs to get done so that you don't have elements going through our, I don't know what you call it, Tim, but when it ends up at, the building, there's these pumps, so it can clog the pumps. And these machines are things that you've never seen before. These are things that are, taken out and then probably not ever visible in any street corner or any field. They're along our, drain canals. And so I for the safety of the individuals that are doing the work, I think it's also a liability issue. So we want to have, somebody with some expertise and experience to be able to operate these machines. And, from what I can tell, the folks that we have today are very experienced and doing a lot of work. And I think that we have some federal requirements to also meet, to be in compliance if we ever were, there was like a field audit, for lack of a better phrase. And we just need to make sure that we're all caught up in to be in compliance of anything like that happens. And so in order for us to achieve that, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we have staffing levels, to perform that work. Otherwise, I think we can end up in a sticky situation. So I appreciate you presenting this to us, both Greg and Tim, and letting us know what needs to get done to be able to hire qualified workers and to retain them. This attrition that's happened over the last 5 years, I think is what I've learned from you today is, not a positive situation to be in. So, just, also, any of the studies that were done, be happy to go over that with you as well as what Trustee Ledesma mentioned. So and thank you for doing the research on this and exploring what we can do to retain the employees that we have right now. It is, I think for workers, I think it is a market out there for them. And so we can easily lose more people today than we can keep them, because even in the restaurant industry, everybody is looking for employees. So they may not be, this is hard labor to do. They have to get up early and they have to go out and work and handle a lot of field work. And so just trying to do what we can to maintain the workers that we have today and also hire some qualified workers in the future. And that was what I wanted to add from my experience in the tour that I took Friday morning. And with that, are you done with the presentation, Greg?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions among the trustees? If not, I'm going to open it up for public comment. And any public comments from anyone? None? Okay, close the public comment and bring it back to the trustees. This is a workshop, so I gather that you will be bringing it back for approval, and I am supportive of the recommendation that you've presented, all the budget, the recommendations that you presented here in the budget. Thank you for all your work behind this. I know it's been probably quite a few months that, both you and Tim have accomplished in getting this done. And, thank you for the team in working this out.
Welcome.
Trustee Ledesma.
No, I was just going to say thanks to Tim, Greg, for the really good work, solid work on a, frankly, it's really solid. And Dustin, I guess you're a part of this too. Good to see you too. Putting this together. It's just a really solid presentation and really lays out a really solid approach to the budgeting, which again is something that was needed, and all things being equal. But I know Tim, you've been working at this, trying to get it, arms around it, and hopefully we can kind of get on some really solid footing with Greg and the staff that supported Dustin, everybody supporting, get this on a really solid footing going forward. So just really, really happy, pleased with the work. Really thorough, good job.
Thanks.
All right.
All right. If there are no other comments, wrap this up. And when you'll be bringing it back to at the next meeting at this point?
Yeah, we'll bring it back in June for recommendation to adopt. And there'll
Okay, thank you.
be a series of recommendations, which you didn't see in this packet, but including some job descriptions and the proposed salaries and those types of things. They'll all come back as one package.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item is item number 7, our district report. Mr. General Manager?
Yeah, give me just a second. Between the PowerPoint and other stuff, my screen is not cooperating as well as I'd like. All right. Well, we went over the budget, and we appreciate the feedback, and also we certainly appreciate the support and the kind words. Tim and I and Dustin have worked long hours over the last several weeks brainstorming and figuring out not only how to present this to the board for consideration and feedback, but also how does this work behind the scenes with our accounting system and our books. So appreciative of the kind words. On assessment administration, so also planning to bring back for the board's consideration in June, moving forward with LWA on the 900 drainage assessment administration, likely Loganower Mickle for 537. Both will be providing proposals to do everything. We'll see what makes the most sense to bring for the board for consideration. Regarding the corrective action plan, nothing new to report to the board. Some of the reimbursable costs and some financial reports will be coming to the board in June as part of the agenda packet, which should check off the finding number 1 and its completion before the end of the fiscal year. So stay tuned for those. Given the board's support regarding the proposed salary adjustments and the maintenance worker series 1-2, I'm going to work with Tim and the operations staff to schedule the recruitment in a way that we can advertise, hopefully, the more attractive salary. Which may mean that we start the recruitment the day after, for example, the board taking action in June. Now it may mean we won't be getting a lot of additional work done, but I want to confirm with the staff that we have the resource available to at least to at least take care of the base operational needs. Tim, I think at this point I can turn it over to you to go over the operation and maintenance items.
Yeah. So, he said at this point, we've got through most of our critical mowing before we lost our last staff. And so we're basically doing mowing at this point and mostly in the internal drainage. Levee system mowing is complete. I shouldn't say complete, is as far as we're going to take it at this moment. We've been leaving the river levee to seed every year as many times as possible, just so that it can get more established. It still needs to get more established after that project and reconstruction. As far as drainage operations, I guess the big one's still waiting on the underground for the SIP pump station. So that'll be pretty exciting when that happens. We can get that pole line out of there, going down Marshall Road and around to it. And we've begun all of our detention basin treatments and such. So those are all underway, again, in advance of staff winding down or losing another staff member. As far as, let's see if there's anything else. Nothing really to report on Swift. On Blacker Canal, we have comments back to the
Tim? Tim, Chris got
Yeah.
dropped out. He's waiting to come back in. Can you just let him back
I didn't even notice.
in?
So on Blacker
Okay.
Canal, we had comments on the mitigation measures presented, or that U.S. Fish and Wildlife was presenting to us as potentials. We had a minor adjustment to them that has gone back. We haven't heard any word from them yet. So we hope that they'll accept what we proposed, and from that point, they can close up the NEPA process, and we can carry the torch on the CEQA process and get this all, battened down our permits. Get rolling on bidding, but at this point, it would be extremely unlikely that we would be seeing anything this year as far as a project.
Yeah, and Tim, also let's, just wanted to add that we're looking at doing a supplemental, what is it, a supplemental, but if we're doing an addendum or a supplemental EIR, what are we doing, Tim? I'm drawing a blank on the
It's an addendum.
addendum, okay.
And
Go ahead.
no, sorry. Yeah, it's just an addendum to the environmental report. So.
And that should address some of the concerns that were expressed by some of the residents about wildlife and the habitat and stuff. So in advance of that addendum going out, there'll be another round of public review or public interaction. And then we'll incorporate that as part of the final environmental documents.
Is that as a result of the comments that you received? Is there anything you can share in advance of that?
Part as a result of the comments we received, and then also what U.S. Fish and Wildlife is also requiring as far as dewatering prior to construction and that kind of stuff. So they have some very specific guidelines that we're going to have to follow during the construction process. And we're going to incorporate that as well into the addendum.
Okay, thank you. Well, do you think it'll cause any more disruption than, there might be some, I think, Tim, you've been hearing a lot from them. These changes, will it cause some feedback, like negative feedback?
It's hard to say. The mitigation measures that we're planning to implement, as far as the public feedback, are some of the ones that they gave us as alternatives, and they're suggested. They're not the most robust versions. They're kind of down the range. And then the complete or near complete dewatering of the canal per U.S. Fish and Wildlife recommendation. I don't know if that could potentially cause more negative feedback from the public or not.
Okay.
It's been quiet since the last go around.
But
Thank
what's
you.
interesting is that this is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife whose primary objective is to preserve fish and wildlife, and these are their commitments to preserve fish and wildlife. So it's not like it's not like we have a lot of choice in the matter. So if we're going to use federal dollars.
I agree. In reaching out to them, do you require or can they participate in the outreach, or is there like this workshop that you do for engagement, re-engagement as a result of this addendum?
There will be some outreach. It's not to the level of what you normally do when you're going to do like a full-blown EIR with public meetings and scoping and all of that stuff. It's a much smaller lift in terms of that. But we can certainly reach out to the folks who, and I think we should, who have expressed some concerns and opinions, and share with them how this is shaping up in advance of it becoming final, and really explain to them, the requirements that are being imposed on us as well.
And I will say, for as many people who reached out with concerns about the project, I get the people that reach out weekly asking, when are we going to actually finally start it? So.
Okay, thank you.
Support as well.
Okay, good.
All right. I guess our other big project, Drever, currently all the demo work is done on the inside. The electrical is roughed in, plumbing's being roughed in. So we're rolling on that. Should we seeing some pretty good progress in the next month on the building. And then periodic inspections, both been completed at this time. One thing of note in the RD 537 inspection is at this time, and it's unknown what will trigger the switch. Our portion of the 537 is being inspected along with the rest of 537 and reported out. So there's a report on that whole basin that includes our portions on it. They've got it noted on there that we're the maintenance for it, but until there's some sort of formalized agreement in place, it won't. And I haven't been able to get an answer on what that'll look like. It won't transfer over to being inspected as part of our RD 900 levy system.
This is by the state, correct, Tim?
Yes. And so it's getting out of the state and what it is that they need to take the action to shift us over. So they inspect us as one inspection and one entity. Either way, the comments on our section were pretty minor, and we will be getting on those as soon as possible. Get through some rodent repairs and some vegetation work. So pretty minor stuff. I think that's about all I have expound on here.
Quick question. I was going to bring it up under emergency preparedness, but it really doesn't fit there. I forgot to bring it up in the budget. In speaking with Brian about repairs of maintenance of our equipment and taking a look at having kind of like a facilities fund to do maintenance, because they still are going to be, the equipment's still going to be with us for a period. Is there anything that we can, is that included in the budget, by the way?
Well, in the budget, we've just made it more robust for our repairs and parts. So we've increased that scope in the budget.
Okay. Thank you.
To anticipate having to do more repairs in the coming years. But I will say, like Brian and I have discussed, in the next, kind of 3 to 5 year plan, we probably are going to have to account for the new mower and a new tractor, and there's a few significant purchases that we'll have to make in the field side.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
I was just going to continue on with the last bit of the project updates, but on the equipment item, the way we could probably set up, a quote unquote sinking fund where we can set some money aside each year in reserve for equipment replacement. Now, physically, how that works with the district's finance software, I'm not sure, and I'm sure Dustin can help figure that one out. But you know, that's something that we can look at doing, and or put together an equipment replacement plan, you know, that maybe looks 5 years out or 10 years out, and what it would look like to fund that, to replace, you know, certain piece of equipment every 5, 10 years or whatever, and what those costs are over time. So we could bring that to the board in the future as well.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, if that's what you're talking about, I mean, the approach on the city side, I think we're having that sort of plan. That's a needs-based plan, right? So, you know, that would be up to Tim, everybody else to kind of identify what those needs are over the 5-year period when we replace them.
Yeah, and even looking
I
at,
just like that. Yeah, I just like that approach from a budgeting perspective, because then no surprises.
Yeah, it's always good to know.
well, even looking at it, like you mentioned, the 10 year or even going 15 year, which is kind of longest life cycle is coming. I mean, just off the top of my head, we've got probably about 1.3 million dollars worth of equipment. So it's
Yeah, one of the good
chunk of
things,
change.
and one of the good things about the new corporation yard, where there's so much ability to store equipment indoors, is going to significantly prolong the life of the equipment. It
Yes.
matters a lot. And I think the district is very fortunate to have such a facility to keep that equipment indoors. It'll extend the life significantly.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, we've already had to replace 2 wiring harnesses. So
Yeah, I hear that's
and-
due to rodents, so, yeah.
So 2 things, if you'll indulge me. One is just a real quick update on the WSAFCA, the Flood Control Agency's efforts towards we're still wrapping up design, closing out comments, 100% for the Yellow Bypass East Levee project. The Corps is kind of stalled a little bit on the NEPA side of things, and so our CEQA side is waiting for them to sort of figure their stuff out. Once they've figured it out, they'll share it with us. We'll update our CEQA document, and then, so we're anticipating at this point, June or July, having our public review, and then the following month, being able to take the action at the WSAFCA board. And then it goes on the shelf until new start construction and funding shows up. So president's budget's being released Thursday or Friday of this week. Not a lot of hope that we're going to see an individual item in there for a new start or funding for West Sac, but you never know. So we'll be pleasantly surprised if it's there, but we're more relying on Congresswoman Matsui and her new start request for West Sac in the appropriations bill this fall. So one way or another, we'll get there. And then AB 921. So this is the kind of it's not really an omnibus bill, but it is the flood bill that the city has put forth, the state legislature. Right now, it's a 3-part bill. The first is to have the state recognize the West Sacramento project and its responsibility to share in the completion of that project. The second part of that bill is an extension on the SB 5 requirement to complete 200-year level of flood protection by 2025. As it stands right now, the bill would extend that deadline to 2030. Which would allow for the federal dollars to roll and for us to really get cooking on completing the levee system. At this point, it's not going to be completed in 4 years by the current deadline. And then the third piece of that is the MA4 consolidation, MA4 levee maintenance area consolidation into RD 900. And so those are the 3 items on the bill. It's passed committee. It's passed financial, whatever that committee is called. But I just learned today that our bill's sponsor, McCarty, is limited to 12 bills or 12 pieces of legislation this year for whatever reason. And he's been heard to say that this particular bill is one of his lowest priorities. And he's not planning on taking it forward any farther. And so we're looking at other ways of getting this bill passed. There is another bill that flood-related bill that SAFEGA has sponsored. That's having the state, it's being taken up by Senator Pan, and it's looking to authorize the Yolo Bypass project. It's a project that just was authorized on the federal side back in Word of 2020, a little earlier this year. And so I'm meeting with SAFEGA on Wednesday. Number one, we're going to add with SAFEGA to that particular piece of legislation. And if there's an opportunity to get the contents of AB 921 to amend that bill to include these components, we're going to pursue that. So that can pick up the ball for us. We'll keep you posted on how that goes.
Thank you. Are there any questions from any of the trustees? No? Okay. Thank you for your presentation, and good luck on the bill. I hope we can find something to keep it moving.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed on the news that, you know, it's kind of static right now where we're at. So I'm hoping we can get something done. So if there are no other comments or questions, I don't think we have anything that we have to approve on the presentation. Next item is item, and let me just open it up for public comment. No requests for public comment. Okay, close it.
Amen.
Thank you. Next item is item 8, number trustee comments. Are there any comments from any of the trustees? No.
No.
Okay. So I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Trustee Alcala moved.
I'll
Trustee
second.
Ledesma second. Thank you. And Mr. General Manager, can you please call the roll?
Trustee Orozco,
Aye.
Trustee Ledesma,
Aye.
Trustee Alcala,
Aye.
President Guerrero.
Aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.